not the average fan is aware of, that could be coming up through the draft and through the AHL and help this Ducks team out in the near future?
I think on the note of them drafting more speed skilled players, I think that it's for the most part is true. I mean, it really started back with Troy Terry, and they drafted Julius Naughton, who was sort of that type of player as well. And then it really showed in 2016, getting Sam Steele and Tyler Soy and Alex Dostie and Max Jones again. I mean, he is a quicker player. He's still that type of guy that Bob Murray likes, with that heavy style and almost like Nick Ritchie kind of mold, but a lot quicker player and a lot smarter player on offense. And then it showed a bit in the last draft getting Antoine Morin, but they still do like those big guys, because they went out and they drafted Maxime Comtois with their first pick, and he is a skilled player, but he is a bigger guy, and he's almost in the same type of mold as Max Jones, where he's a bit quicker. He's that big goal-scoring winger, but he can still play on the edge and be physical. So it's kind of a mix of both. I mean, they definitely have gone the skill route and the speed route and the smaller type of guys with Steele and with Morand and with Tyler Sawyer and those types of players, but they still do like their big guys. It'll be interesting to see who they get at this draft and the way they go. But as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, I mean, they usually like to just draft the best guy available for the most part. I mean, we've seen them do that.
That's the smartest move. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of leaned heavily on forwards lately. I mean, you look at the last draft, they drafted 2016, they drafted 5 forwards, 1 defenseman. Last year, they drafted 4 forwards and 1 goaltender. So they've been drafting and stocking up on forwards, which makes sense. So it looks like they're just trying to take the best forward available for the most part. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of quality defensemen available. I mean, the draft has been stacked with forwards for the last few years. This year, it's pretty heavy in the first round on defense, so it'll be interesting to see which route they take, probably getting a pick around 18 to 22, depending on how everything finishes out. But as for guys that are ready to come up, I mean, it really is Max Jones, Sam Steele, and Troy Terry. I don't think Tyler Soy, he just finished his last year in junior hockey. He's most likely with San Diego next year. I don't think he's ready. Maxime Comtois will probably have another year in junior. Same with Antoine Morin. And that's pretty much it, other than the guys in the goals. But if you're looking at guys who are going to make a big impact possibly next season for the Ducks, if they get a considerable amount of ice time, it would be Sam Steele, Max Jones, and Troy Terry. Although I think it's better suited for them to probably start the season in San Diego and play some more minutes. But those are the guys right now. Those are the big 3 that we're really looking to push the next movement for the Ducks.
All right, let's get to the next one here. I know we're running a little long tonight.
Yeah, we've got a ton of questions again, which I mean, it was so... Everybody who came in the chat, I know if you weren't there last time, but even if you're in here this time, I mean, good on you guys for coming out and joining the chat after two bad losses, the 8-1 loss, and of course the season. I mean, we love you guys coming out no matter what, but it's great to see everybody out here on a loss and really contributing in the chat and asking the questions. It helps the show flow along. It's great for us, and we love to see the interaction in the chat and everybody just talking Ducks hockey. So thank you, everybody who is coming out in the chat, or even everybody listening the next day. We've got a lot of comments recently from a lot of you talking about how you enjoyed the show, and it's been great listening to us. So I just want to send a bit of a shout out to everybody there for participating in it. Let's move on to the next question. So we had Christopher. He said here, with LA and Anaheim being swept, is it safe to say goodbye to heavy hockey team area? And this goes right off what we talked about. And then he said, what changes do the Ducks need to make in order to keep up with today's NHL?
Oh, we kind of covered that. I think it should be goodbye to heavy hockey for the most part.
Yeah.
Unless you have just big guys who can skate, right? And like a Blake
like
Wheeler.
the Winnipeg Jets.
And that guy can skate. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah, no, that was just mentioned in our chat. Yeah, the Jets. That's a prime example of having a big team that can skate. Yeah, unless you're able to pick that player up, which, I mean, it's not easy to get. I mean, you can wish and want all you want. I mean, drafting guys like that is just really difficult. I mean, the Jets, we've been talking about the Jets as hockey fans for a few years now about when are they going to be good, when are they going to be good, and holy hell, they're good this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard to draft that way. It came through a long process. You can't just trade your way into a Stanley Cup anymore. I mean, at least unless you have a good core of players already. But, yeah, if you could build your team like the Jets, go for it.
And like you said, it's not easy, and it's not like they're all big guys either. I mean, they've got a lot of smaller skill guys in there, and Ehlers and Connor and Perreault even, he was a big part of their team this year. And it just so happens that with Wheeler and Scheifele and Laine, they've got some bigger guys up front, and they like to throw the body around it. Of course, that blue line is just a bunch of massive guys down there with Jacob Trouba and Tyler Myers and Dustin Byfuglien. I mean, that's a bunch of big men back on the blue line, and it's difficult to build a team like that. I mean, it's a lot of credit to the way they've been able to build their team and still compete, having a lot of heavier guys, but they play a style that is reminiscent of what is needed to win today in the NHL. And I think it is a goodbye to heavy hockey. I think you look at the two teams who made the playoffs that still play that way, got swept in the first round in the Ducks and the Kings. They're really the only two teams left. Maybe not in the entire league, but definitely of the teams that made the playoffs that still play that way. And they got their asses handed them, for lack of a better word, by the Vegas Golden Knights and the San Jose Sharks. So I think he's right. It really is, if not the end, it's pretty close to it.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun watching I mean, of course, we'd like to see the Ducks still in it, but it is a lot more fun watching teams like Vegas and Winnipeg and Pittsburgh all fly around the ice. And I mean, even the Oilers, when they're playing on their game, and a lot of that goes through Connor McDavid, but it's a lot more fun watching that style of hockey than watching the big old bruising Western Conference teams from the past. And that was fun to watch because the Ducks were good, and that's what they were good at the time. But I don't think it competes with the way hockey's played today.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's get some of the questions in the chat now. So I guess we'll look at this question from Chase. He asked earlier, but he brought it up again here. It goes back to the draft. What do you think the Ducks focus on in this year's draft if you had to pick between forward or defense?
I'm going to say they look at a goaltender or defenseman. I think they've been drafting well with forwards. And we saw the issues with blue line depth. You don't think you have it, or you think you have it, and then you have injuries, and then you don't. So I would see them maybe drafting another defenseman or even another even a goaltender coming up.
Yeah, I think I would still like to see one. I mean, with the first round pick, I would still like to see another forward come into this lineup. I feel like, you've got your good pieces in Steele and Jones and Comtois, but again, I feel like those are second line players when they hit the NHL, probably as their top ceiling. The Ducks are in need of really that elite forward prospect, and I don't think you get that at where they're drafting. Maybe you can get a steal. I mean, Barzal was a middle-of-the-pack pick, and that was a huge hit for the Islanders. I'm not saying you can get that in every draft, but there are guys that end up falling around 12 to 18 that end up being elite offensive players in the National Hockey League, and it's happening less and less with the quality of scouting nowadays, but I think you go forward just to hope you hit on that guy, because they need somebody down the road that is going to replace the type of production that Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry bring to the lineup. I mean, a core right now of Rickard Rakell, Andre Kasha, Sam Steele, Max Jones, Maxim Comtois looks pretty nice, but you still need, especially up the middle, that number one center. And I feel like long-term Sam Steele is probably a number two guy, even though it would be great to see him playing with Rickard Rakell in the future. I think you go center if you can, but I mean, the way anytime I've looked at the draft this year, it looks heavily stacked with defensemen all around that middle part of the draft. And if the Ducks are going to take the best guy available, it probably does end up being a defenseman. I wouldn't be surprised. And as we already mentioned, Carlisle does like to get the best guy available when he can.
And that's the Bob Murray special, defenseman. He drafts them well. We all know all about that.
Swedish defenseman, usually.
True. No, that's true.
Connor brought up a question earlier too. He said this series has confused him with Welinski, Pettersson, and Larson. Obviously, the former two playing, the latter being a scratch tonight. What are your thoughts on these guys next year?
On Welinski and Pettersson?
Yeah, and then to some extent Larson, even though we haven't seen them. Like, where do you think they fit in next year, and what kind of roles are they given?
I think Welinski has some seasoning to do. It's not his fault for the way he looked. He was kind of thrown in the fire here at the late season and playoffs. It's hard to put a lot on the way he's played. Also being paired with a rookie most of the time with Marcus Pettersson, that's also tough too. And I don't think Pettersson's been all that terrible recently. I feel like he's had some good moments, but same thing goes for him. It's his first stint. He's only played, I don't know, how many games has he played? 30? I have to go back and check his actual stats. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head. He hasn't been amazing, but I don't think he's been terrible. I think next season you would see him paired with somebody else from the Ducks system, or unless they go and grab somebody in the offseason. But I think Welinski has some more seasoning to do. I would love to see Jacob Larson get a shot. We've been talking about that nonstop for 20 episodes because it's like, wait a minute, why is this guy all of a sudden high on the chart and then not playing? Just interesting. And maybe he'll get his chance in training camp and make some noise, and we'll get a chance to check out what he brings to this Ducks team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they fit in because there's going to be a lot of change just on that bottom pairing next year with Boschman gone for sure. BX probably out the door. I believe Holzer's contract is up too, but again, he probably wasn't a guy that was ever going to be a guy who could fit in on that 5 or 6 spot for the Ducks. So it is all the kids. It's Jacob Begna, it's Marcus Pettersson, it's Andy Welinski, it's Jacob Larson. It's any of those guys down in San Diego. It's their job to be had at this point, unless the Ducks go out and get a depth defenseman. So I still really want to see what Jacob Larson can bring because we haven't seen him at all. I mean, this is one of the biggest surprises of the season that we haven't seen Jacob Larson for one game. And I mean, a lot of people mentioning in the chat and on Twitter that he was brought up, but a lot of AHL teams do that. I mean, we saw Columbus today because I think they've changed it to Cleveland. Their season is over, so they just brought up a bunch of guys from Cleveland onto their roster because their rosters are unlimited at this point. You can just have them all scratched on your roster, and if you want to throw them in, you can. It's just that option, right? So I feel like that's why he was brought up, but I just can't believe we haven't seen him once. I mean, it would have been nice to see what he could do, especially late in the season when we were still playing Pettersson and Welinski.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to get a chance, for sure when you're talking about training camp. I mean, that's where we're going to see him next. And I think there's a good chance we could see him in the regular season. But, I mean, the big guys that have been given the opportunity were Welinski and Pettersson. And I would expect that they'd be given the first opportunity again unless somebody wows in training camp.
Yeah, they have to be. And, of all the names, and there's a lot of guys in San Diego as well, not just on defense, up on forward as well, guys that we've expected to already make this lineup. In Nick Rodelius is a guy we haven't really seen. Kalle Kossela we saw at times. Kevin Waugh is still down in San Diego, and you add into the mix, like we've already mentioned, Troy Terry, Max Jones, Sam Steele. I mean, if they don't make the Ducks next year, no matter what, San Diego is going to be a scary team, and they're going to be a fun team to watch. I mean, you've got pretty much all the same guys that are going to be there, and they're a borderline playoff team this year. And then you add into the mix, I mean, what are probably going to be 3 of their best players next year, Max Jones, Sam Steele, and Troy Terry. I mean, they're going to almost, at times, be more fun and more exciting to watch than the Ducks on occasion because they're going to be all those guys that we can't wait to see in Anaheim playing a lot of minutes down in San Diego and hopefully having successful seasons and maybe earning call-ups. I mean, we've talked about this before and how tight the Ducks' top 9 is, especially up front right now. Whether we're going to see any of them get called up at all or make the team remains to be seen. But either way, that's going to be a fun team to watch in San Diego, isn't it? I mean, especially if Dallas Eakins is still there.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Dallas Eakins is one of the best coaches when it comes to bringing up and training prospects in the systems, and he's proven that with Anaheim and the goals. I mean, they've been a fantastic team since his arrival, and the depth has proven that for Anaheim when there's been injuries.
Yeah, I guess a last question we can sum it up with here, and I apologize because I don't remember who said this. I just picked it up earlier from in the chat, but it's just a general question about the playoffs. He asked, who do we think is going to win the Cup? And then what are our expectations next year for the Ducks?
Looking at this, I would love to see the Leafs win the Cup with a American captain, Austin Matthews on that team, right? Is he the captain on that team?
There's no captain on the Leafs, but
there's no captain. Well, in my heart he is because he's American, and obviously. If the Ducks can't win, I want to see the best American player step up and win a Stanley Cup. And that way when all the Canadians are happy the Cup went back there, we can say that an American brought it to them. But if not for them, I don't really realistically think they're going to win. I really feel like it's going to be the Nashville Predators. I feel like it's their year. I know that Pekka Rinne has not had the best start to his playoffs. In fact, he's been abysmal. But they won tonight 3-2. And I think they're going to clean house with Colorado. and they'll be on to the next round, and that's going to be a bloodbath between Nashville and Winnipeg next series. But I think Nashville's got the experience and the depth to take care of them, and they'll move on and win the Cup.